Listen up. There's no more excuses.
We're empowering those who want the hustle by exposing the status quo.
The days of ordinary are over.
It's time to crush mediocrity and start discovering your greatest potential.
Welcome to the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation.
To the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle.
Welcome back to another episode of the Hustle Nation podcast. And today we've got another failure files. This one is how Lego, one of the world's greatest brands, almost destroyed itself. It's an interesting story because I think a lot of us grew up playing with Legos. A lot of us know it. It's a nostalgic brand for many, and I would argue near and dear to some of our hearts. It's an awesome story overall because Lego didn't nearly die because it stopped innovating. Lego nearly died because it couldn't stop innovating. Just imagine walking into Lego headquarters in 2003. This is Lego, one of the most recognizable toy companies on planet Earth. Generations of kids grew up with it. It's an incredible brand recognition, incredible logo. And behind the scenes, the company is in serious trouble. Hard to imagine, isn't it? Sales had been falling for quite some time. And of course, costs were going up. Lego reported a loss of approximately 1.4 billion Danish kroners in 2003. And here's what's crazy. Lego didn't become lazy. They weren't sitting around selling the same old red and yellow bricks that the world passed them by. Quite the opposite. They had been innovating like crazy. Lots of new products, many new pieces and colors and types of games and theme parks, clothing, media, characters, experiences. Lego was trying to become more than Lego. Looking back now, you could say maybe Lego was trying to become Disney or akin to Disney. And that effort almost killed them. So how exactly did Lego lose its way? Well, to understand this, let's go all the way back to the early 1990s. Lego had a problem. See, kids were changing, video games were exploding. That's a time that Nintendo and Super Nintendo were taking over. Computers were also entering homes. Play patterns were changing, and Lego's core patents had long since expired. In fact, they became part of the public domain, meaning competitors could manufacture compatible building bricks. Hard to imagine. So leadership asked a reasonable question. What does Lego need to become next? The answer eventually became a lot of things, and maybe too many things. Lego expanded into areas beyond its traditional construction toys. They eventually rolled out Legoland theme parks and video games, clothing, entertainment, new toy concepts, and more specialized components. On paper, it sounded exactly like what business consultants were telling them to do, to be innovative, diversify, find new revenue streams, new customers. Except there was a problem. Lego was becoming incredibly complicated. And if you think about it, it becomes more difficult when you try to become everything to everyone. You end up becoming nothing. So here is the brick problem, as they say. This is one of many of my favorite details of the entire story. But a Lego brick isn't just a piece of plastic. Every different shape and color creates optional consequences, if you will. It has to be designed, molded, manufactured, innovated, stored, shipped, forecasted, and eventually incorporated into sets. During this Lego era, there were assortments of unique elements, and they just exploded. Accounts of the turnaround described the active element count reaching roughly 12,000 plus, and many were highly specialized. That meant designers could create amazing looking sets, but behind every cool new piece was additional complexity, more molds, more inventory, more supply chain headaches, more cost. Lego had essentially allowed creative freedom to become operational chaos. And I think that's a great business lesson here. Your customer might see one cool new Lego piece. Your operations team sees another SKU that needs to exist for years. And when does that truly stop? When is too many SKUs too many SKUs? It's been argued that Lego didn't even know what making money was or how to make money. This is where things became dangerous. Lego had expanded so rapidly that it lacked sufficient visibility into the profitability of individual products. That's insane when you think about it. I mean, that's a problem startups and family businesses have. Imagine having hundreds of products, probably even more, and not really understanding which ones make money. Because revenue isn't profit, growth isn't profit, innovation isn't necessarily profit, and complexity can hide bad economics for a surprisingly long time. Then eventually the bill arrives, as we've all seen. For Lego, it arrived around 2003, 2004. And then enter Jorgen Vig Kunstrup, probably butchered that name. In 2004, Lego made a huge leadership decision, and they hired Jorgen, who became the CEO. He was only 35 years old at the time, and notably, he became the first person outside of the founding family to run the company. He had previously worked for McKinsey and had already been working inside Lego. And instead of asking, what new thing can Lego solve? The turnaround centered on a much simpler question. What should Lego stop doing? That's the pivot in this entire story. And one where you could argue when you really dive deep into the story and understand the CEO himself is he made an effort to make things simple. And if you know me, you know how much I really like making life and business simple because simple is easy, easy is fun. And when it's simple and easy, it tends to be because you're generating results. So here's lesson number one. More innovation isn't always better innovation. Lego didn't need more ideas, it needed discipline. Obviously, that's a lesson many entrepreneurs and small businesses could learn. Kunstrup's leadership team simplified the portfolio. Products were eliminated. Complexity was attacked. Operations were scrutinized. The company started paying much closer attention to the economics behind individual sets. The basic philosophy became innovation still matters, but innovation needs boundaries because innovation that customers don't value is just expense. And as I always say, the confused mind tends to say no. That is where simplicity always wins. Fast forward, Lego started selling things. And I don't mean Lego sets. The company began shedding businesses and assets that weren't essential to the core. One of the biggest moves came in 2005. Lego sold control of Legoland theme parks to Merlin Entertainments while retaining a minority interest. Think about the psychology of that decision. Theme parks sound amazing. They sound like they make a lot of money, but they sure carry a lot of liability. They make Lego feel like Disney. Sound like it too. They're exciting, visible, prestigious. But when you're fighting for survival, the question changes from, is it cool? To, is this what we're uniquely great at? We all know the answer is probably not. Those are very different questions, as you can tell, and probably one you should ask yourself if you're a business owner or business leader. Lesson number two, your brand can expand too far. Lego had one of the strongest core products ever invented, a simple brick. And importantly, the bricks work together. A brick manufactured decades ago can foreseeably still connect with a brick made today, 20 plus years later. That compatibility creates an enormous ecosystem. Kids don't just buy one set, their Lego collection compounds over years. But Lego had started chasing down outside that incredible core. That's something businesses do all the time. Scope creep, we call it. But we become successful at A and then add B, then C, and then D. And eventually their business spends more time managing B, C, and D than they do improving their customer thing they originally invented. Growth can actually dilute your competitive advantage, or specifically, scope creep can. Stick with what you're really good at. Can you expand? Can you evolve? Sure. Should you? Maybe, but that's a question for another day. What's interesting here is Legoland didn't simply go backward, and this is the nuance that makes the case study great. Lego didn't decide innovation was the problem. Let's just make basic bricks again. They got smarter about innovation. Look at what followed. Lego Star Wars, Lego video games, Lego Harry Potter, Bionicle. Later, Ninjago, Lego movies, sophisticated sets for adults, and many, many more licensed types of products with different brands that we all know. Massive collector models. And Lego didn't stop evolving. It learned to evolve around its core strength. That's a massive difference. Star Wars still uses Lego bricks. Harry Potter still uses Lego bricks. A $500 collectible set still relies on the same underlying system of play. The innovation strengthens the ecosystem rather than distracting from it. Lesson 3. Strategy means subtraction. I love this idea. This might be the biggest lesson from Lego and maybe one of my favorites. When a business is struggling, our instinct is usually add something, add a service, add a salesperson, a product, a software, a market, campaign, a feature. But Lego turned around, required enormous amounts of subtraction. Fewer distractions, fewer unnecessary products, less complexity, less discipline, more focus on what customers actually loved about Lego. That's counterintuitive for some of us. Sometimes your business doesn't need another idea, it needs permission to kill an existing one. And in closing, that's what makes the Lego story so fascinating to me. They almost innovated themselves out of business, not because innovation is bad, but because they lost sight of the question that they should have really come before, which is, why do our customers choose us in the first place? For Lego, the answer wasn't theme parks, it wasn't clothing, it wasn't generic entertainment company, or trying to be another company like Disney. It was the system of creative play built around a little plastic brick. Once Lego understood that again, innovation became incredibly powerful. Because instead of asking, what else could Lego become? They could ask, how much more can we do with what Lego makes so special? Those questions sound similar, but they're not. And maybe that's the question worth asking about your own business. Are the new things you're adding making your core business strategy stronger? Or are you distracting from what your customers know and who you really are in the first place? Sometimes growth means doing more, and sometimes growth means getting really good at saying no to stuff. That's this week's hustle case study. As I look back on that and I just reflect, there's a lot of really great lessons in there. More than some of the other hustle case studies we've talked about or the hustle files. I think that it's one of those questions we should ask ourselves is, what are we doing that we no longer need to be doing? Is there fat that we can cut and things that are not moving the needle forward? It's a question I ask myself, my clients all the time. And I hope that you'll ask yourself that question today. And hopefully you find the answer. Thanks so much for listening to another episode. We'll catch you on the flip side. Peace.